Over the last, oh, I don't know, 30, 40 years, the number of interest groups has exploded. There are far, far, far more of these active in the country right now. Here's a chart showing their diversity as of up through 1995. But what I really want to talk about is the growth of interest groups right now. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of interest groups. Most of them have a headquarters in Washington, D.C., and a lot of them are highly specialized and seemingly trivial. Every industry you can think of has an interest group. No matter how small or minor it is, it's got an interest group. Pencil manufacturers have an interest group. Anything you can think of that's a business has an interest group, as well as other interest groups. We'll talk about types of interest groups later. Every one of them has some sort of staff and publications, websites, electronic newsletters. They send out mass emails, all these sorts of things. Most of them are economic. 80% are either occupational, industrial, or professional. So most of these are trying to regulate their industry. Well, how do they get what they want? How does an interest group achieve its goals? Lobbying is the primary way. This is when you hire someone to communicate with a lawmaker. So if I knew a bunch of people at the Capitol, I don't. I could be hired as a lobbyist. Well, most lobbyists, incidentally, are former representatives, former senators, former staffers, people who've worked on Capitol Hill. After a while, they can leave Capitol Hill, increase their salary by 2, 4, 10, 20 times, and become a lobbyist, where they get paid by corporations or paid by a public interest group or whatever it is to go talk to politicians at the Capitol and try to get the policies that they want enacted. There's they're called lobbyists, by the way, because they used to hang out in the lobby of a hotel that was right by the Capitol, and a lot of the congressmen would stay there. And so when the congressman would go to the hotel, there would be all these guys waiting in the lobby to talk to them, and that's where we get this word lobbyist. There's two basic types of lobbyists. One type of lobbyist works full-time for a group. So you might be an oil company lobbyist. That's all you do. You work for the oil companies. That's it. Or you might be a lobbyist that will work for anyone. And so you just open up shop and anyone can call you up. And you may work on one issue for a couple of weeks with one group. You may have a regular contract with another group that you always do work for. But you do work for lots of different groups, whoever's willing to hire you. Lobbyists, we tend to think of them as bad, but they're not all bad. They're really not. They are experts in their field. They're a source of information. I mean, let's face it, politicians, they don't know everything about every issue, believe it or not. And so lobbyists oftentimes can provide them valuable information. Now, can lobbyists manipulate and mislead them to get what they want? Absolutely. But they are a valuable source of information. They can also help politicians with political strategy. What's the best way to get legislation passed? If you do this, is this group going to fight back? Lobbyists are experts on that as well. Lobbyists help on election campaigns. They know what large groups of the people want. If I'm a lobbyist for an environmental group, a candidate may come to me and say, if I say this, is that going to make that environmental group happy or upset them? Or if I say this, is that going to mean the oil companies are going to stop giving me money or not? Lobbyists also provide ideas and innovations. A lot of bills that are introduced into Congress and passed into law are written by lobbyists. They come from the industry themselves. And occasionally they'll pass these laws without taking the lobbyist name off of it. And it gets kind of embarrassing when it becomes that clear that the congressman is simply taking a law from the lobbyist and a bill from the lobbyist, introducing it to be law. Interest groups will get involved in electioneering, trying to help a candidate win. This could mean donating money to the campaign, as we've talked about. This could mean asking your members to go work for the candidate. Unions, for example, are very famous about getting their members to go out and call people, work phone banks. Hey, you need to go out and vote for my candidate. Or go door to door or put up signs. Some of them form political action committees so they can give candidates to money. We've talked about PACs. They were created in 1974, and they're a way that you can give money to the PAC, and then the PAC donates money to campaigns. Litigation. Interest groups can use the courts. Very famously, the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored Persons, and the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. These are simply interest groups. And also goes to show you that not all interest groups are wealthy groups of people trying to get what they want. The NAACP and the ACLU are the ones that filed the lawsuit in Brown versus Board of Education. That was an example of an interest group using the court to get what it wanted, desegregated schools back in 1954. Also, interest groups will file what are called amicus curiae briefs. Amicus curiae means friend of the court. And when the Supreme Court gets cases, anybody who wants can send in their, like, here's what I think you should do, Supreme Court, and that's called an amicus curiae brief. They're not going to read your amicus curiae brief, but they're going to read an amicus curiae brief from the NRA on a gun rights case. They're going to read an amicus curiae brief from the NAACP on a civil rights case. And so interest groups can actually be really important. And recently, particularly with this court, lately, amicus curiae briefs have very often shown up word for word in the court's decision. So these things can be very, very influential. You can also file a class action lawsuit. This is a lawsuit where you're suing on behalf of lots and lots of people. So, for example, there was a class action lawsuit filed on behalf of female employees of Walmart recently, saying that they were being underpaid relative to their male counterparts. This was done by an interest group. Now, interestingly enough, the Supreme Court threw that out and made it much harder to file class action lawsuits. So that may be a less fruitful path to change in the future. You can also go public. You go public by talking to the people. You might run commercials, use marketing strategies, advertising, protest. I mean, essentially, Martin Luther King and his Southern Christian Leadership Council were an interest group that went public. That's all they were. I mean, they were out there trying to use public opinion to get lawmakers to do what they want. It worked for them, but that's what they were. The Tea Party was organized largely by advertising agencies as a way to try to push policies that interest groups wanted. So, all right, that's that. Those are how groups try to shape policy.